Hi, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's ACT Prep webinar all about mathematics. My name is Dr. Mary Cook. I'm the ACT Prep Coordinator for Metro Nashville Public Schools, and we are so happy to have you with us. What is amazing is we have people from all over the South. We have obviously our group of fantastic students from here in Nashville, but we also have a whole group of people from Memphis, as well as somebody who registered from Georgia. So we're reaching all across the entire South, and we're happy to have all of you join us. What I'm curious about in the chat, if you will just share how you heard about the webinar. Did you hear about it on social media? Did your teacher tell you? Did you get an email, a call out? Just kind of type just a couple words. How did you hear about the webinar and get signed up? Just kind of want to know, how did you learn about it? Counselors, that's awesome. Thank you. Who else can tell us how you heard about the webinar? Instagram, teacher recommended, email, fantastic. The social media, fabulous. Counselors again, and just keep adding that in. Your mom found out and signed you up. Gotta love those parents support. That's awesome. Terrific. Just keep adding those answers. I'm not going to read them all, but keep adding those answers, because that's how I'm going to, find out what was our most effective means of communication to get people to join us and help you out with the ACT as that coming up on March 1st for the state ACT. As a reminder, we are recording this. And also, as we go through this, if you have questions, you are welcome to come off from mute to ask your question, or put your question in the chat, whichever you're the most comfortable with. Earlier today, I emailed out a PDF of a document called Preparing for the ACT. We are going to use that toward the end of the presentation to go through some practice questions. So if you have that available, great. If not, I'm going to actually project those questions that we're going to use onto the screen. So if you don't have it, you'll still be able to see what we're working on. We're going to do a Kahoot at the end to kind of review some of the information. And then there's also going to be an evaluation form, just so we can get your input on not only how we did, but what you want to learn in the future, so then we can make sure we meet your needs, because that's the point. You're the ones that are going to be taking the ACT. We want to make sure that we get your questions answered and your needs met before you get to that point. So with that, I'm going to turn over the program to Ms. Talley. Ms. Talley is a math and ACT prep teacher here in Nashville at Whites Creek High School, and she's going to take you through all the tips that you need to help get through that math section quickly and easily. Ms. Talley, do you need me to do the PowerPoint again, or do you have it this time?
I have it up this time.
Okay, great.
Let's see if it works for us. So good evening. And like Miss Mary said, thank you for everyone that was able to join in. Again, my name is Miss Talley. I am part of Metro Nashville Public Schools pool of teachers, right? And I teach math, integrated 3 actually, to our juniors here at Whites Creek. I am just going to pull up the PowerPoint so we can get started. See if I can share my screen. All right. So again, this is the ACT. Now it is the math subpart. And the purpose of the presentation is to understand the part of the ACT that deals with the math test, and also to understand the importance of using specific ACT math test taking strategies. I think that it is important that you understand, like, right, we're on the webinar so that we can understand math strategies for test taking. So not so much the content of what you're learning or like a standard, but actual test taking strategies that'll get you through the ACT more efficiently, okay? All right, and the way that the test is set up, particularly for the math portion, you're looking at 60 multiple choice questions, and you'll have 60 minutes to complete that test. And if we do just some like really simple math, we're talking about 1 minute per question, right, to complete this test. And so you definitely have to be able to have some test taking strategies. And also just looking at like score wise, right? So in order to qualify, for some people I know that are looking for like scholarships, if your pathway is college after you graduate, we know a lot, there's a Hope scholarships, but there's lots of scholarships, but more particularly for Tennessee, that is the Hope Scholarship. And it's a minimum composite score of 21. Um, but thinking about, so the composite score is an average of all four though, right? But even if you're getting a 21 in each section, which is math, reading, science, and English, then averagely you're going to come out with a 21, right? But it is an average for that particular scholarship. And the other part where it talks about 33 to like 34 questions correct to get a score of 22, we're going to talk a little bit more about that here on the next slide. So the way the math is set up, on this one side, you can see like if you're looking to get, we're going to talk about the highlighted one, particularly like a 21 to a 23. Out of those 60 questions, they're like, okay, you need to get between 33 to 38 correct, right? And what I love about the ACT is that like you're not punished for getting an answer wrong. Like you're not getting points taken away if you end up with an incorrect answer. But what is counted are the ones that you get correct. And so I think that's important. And for the scholars that are wanting to go, of course, above and beyond, you have that table there for you as well. All right, so let's kind of talk about the breakdown of the test itself. There are like three main ideas, right? Like preparing for higher math, integrating essential math skills, and then modeling. The one that is going to have the most questions is the first idea, this preparing for higher math, looking at 34 to 36 questions. But these are things that you're learning or should be learning in class now, right? So these are questions that they're asking you up to a 12th grade level of math. And for most people, most students, you're not taking the ACT until you're like in the 11th and 12th grade. So you should have a pretty good accumulation of math information. But you've got like 4 to 6 questions that are talking about number and quantity, the 7 to 9 in 3 different areas of algebra, functions, and geometry. You're going to get 5 to 7 questions about statistics and probability. And then integrating essential skills, they're basically talking about word problems, right? So you're going to have anywhere from 24 to 26 problems. And then modeling, you're going to have 15 plus questions. Any questions so far about how the test is broken down? And you can put your questions in the chat. You can use the raise your hand feature that's in Teams, or if you just need to unmute because you can't type in the chat, you can unmute and ask your question, okay? All right, so what not to expect. So with the ACT, it does not provide any formula. So if you've taken like past state tests, you notice that like at the beginning of that test, they may give you like a formula sheet that you can tear out and have available for you. So the ACT does not have that. So there are some things that you'll have to put to memory, right? Especially when it comes to like formulas and theorems that we'll talk about a little bit later. And then you also may use a TI-83 series calculator. We had a question in the previous webinar about a particular calculator. I think it was like a Casio brand. But the link or the website that I put below, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the one that gives you like the breakdown of the test day and what calculators are required, are acceptable.
Yes, that's correct. If you want to check about your specific calculator, you can do that. Basically, scientific and graphing calculators are allowed. There are some specifics, some of those that are not programmable, but basically there are many computers that can get like internet access and those types of things are not allowed. But the ones that if you're using it in class, typically those are the kinds that are allowed. But if you want to check and see what those details are, that website that's listed on the screen is the one that you would use.
Awesome. And when I get an opportunity to unshare my screen, I'll try to remember to put the QR code in there for you. If I know some of you all like to use the QR code. So use your calculator. So I put this in red because I was like, you're going to have a calculator there. If you know how to use that graphing calculator, use the calculator, right? But you want to use it wisely, being careful like of negative numbers and fractions. If you all are using, which we use in class, the Texas Instrument, we've got TI 84s that we use. And if you know how to use those graphing calculators, they will be a world of help to you, right? Because you can get through some of those problems pretty quickly using those calculators. And being careful, right? Of if you're trying to put a negative number in and you keep getting the incorrect answer, checking to make sure you're using it correctly. The TI 30X is the question. I believe you can use those.
Yeah,
But
I'm not familiar with a specific calculator type.
yeah.
So, but generally, if you're using it in class, it's pretty okay. If it has most of them don't do this anymore. It's pretty old fashioned. A tape printout, that's not okay. So I have an ACT publication here, and what it says about calculators is you may use any 4-function, scientific, or graphing calculator as long as it is a permitted calculator modified, if necessary, as described in the following. For additional details and ACT's most current calculator policy, visit the website that I put into the chat and that Ms. Tally had on her screen. And you'll get all the details there. And if you're not sure, you can check with your teacher, or you can even contact ACT and they will tell you. But I'm going to tell you, most of the calculators you guys are using are going to be just fine.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that TI 30, I know that it's like a lower or basic TI series. And those are some of the ones that I've used in class before. So I'm pretty sure that Texas Instrument should be okay. So let's talk about some strategies though with math subpart particularly. And I love this strategy, right? I love that the ACT, whoever makes it, and decided to do it this way, right? So math is the only part of the ACT that is in order of difficulty. So as you begin the test, you're going to see some easier questions that tend to be earlier in the testing. And as you get towards the end to on to number 60 or higher 50s and things like that, you're going to be looking at questions that have more difficulty or may take you longer to answer. And I love that because it helps you to tackle, like you can make a decision on like how you're going to tackle the math part. And there may be some questions where you're like, nope, not doing that one. That's okay, right? It's going to take me longer, but those ones that you can do quickly under a minute, that will help you and it'll save you some time for those that may be a little more tricky or a little more difficult to answer. So strategy 2 is now, later, never. And the way that this works is now is you do the problems that you're sure you can do quickly and accurately, right? Those are those problems that if I look at this, like I'm really good at algebra. So if I look at an algebra problem, I'm like, oh, I know that real quick. I can answer that question. Go ahead and do that. Later, is if a problem looks time consuming. If you look at it and maybe it's a word problem or a statistic problem and you're like, that's going to take me a long time. You can save that for later on when you have a reservoir of time left, right? Doing those quicker problems, getting those done, and then saving that time for those ones that look more time consuming. You want to do the nows first. And then never is like sometimes you just got to walk away. And like I said at the beginning of the webinar, because you are not marked, or it's not a bad marking, like if you get something wrong, then you can definitely do that, right? I can definitely be like, nope, I have no idea how to answer this question. And then you can answer with your bubble of the day and move on. If you have not seen our previous webinars, that bubble of the day is like you're going to have bubbles that you can choose from, right? But if you get stuck on this question, you're going to choose one bubble as your bubble of the day that every time I get stumped, I'm just going to bubble in the third circle and you're going to move on, right? So that you're not all over the place and kind of guessing each question. When you get stumped, if your bubble of the day again is that third bubble, bubble it in and move on. All right, let's look at strategy 3. This strategy 3, if you've never looked at process of elimination in math before, it'll save your life, right? So ACT again does not take away any points for wrong answers, so you should guess. And that is done by two strategies. And the first one is called using the process of elimination, or what you may see as POE. And that it helps you improve your chances of guessing, right? So if I look at a problem and I'm like, okay, I can kind of eliminate some stuff that I'm looking at. I read the problem, I look at the answers, and immediately I'm going to be like, no, no way that's the answer, or no way that's the answer. And so I can mark through some things, right, before I even have an answer or get the mark an answer to the question. And what you do not want to do, and I wanted to make sure that I highlighted this in bold, is do not leave any of your questions blank. Use your letter of the day or go ahead and fill in properly the correct answer. The second part of this strategy is what we call ballparking. And it's how you are narrowing down your choices by estimating your answer. And so you may not have like an exact number, but if you can get close to a number, then you can go ahead and eliminate everything else that would not be correct, right? And so what we're going to do on the next slide, this is for all of the participants. You can use the chat or you can answer out loud. And so for the sake of the idea that you only have 1 minute to answer a question, I want us to practice ballpark. And so on the next slide, you have a question that I'm going to read out loud to you, and you're going to have 1 minute to determine what you think the answer is. I want you to use process of elimination and ballparking to come up with that answer, right? So not so much math and the exact answer, but just an approximation. And so the problem says there are 600 school children in the Lakeview district. If 54 of them are high school seniors, what is the percentage of high school seniors in the Lakeville district? And so you've got A at 0.9%, B 2.32%, C 9%, D 11%, or E 90%. And I want you to think about how to determine your answer, and then if you'll put your answer in the chat, please. Let me set my timer first, though. Let me pull it up. 1 minute and start now. Mm. All right, we got some answers in here. You got about 30 more seconds. $15 seconds. Oh, I got a lot of answers. Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's see. All right, so I really had this is so funny. So it's a good consensus. You literally have either C or D as the answer. And then I have one response that says convert the questions into decimals and multiply it by 600. I love that answer. So I am going to give you a little bit of a breakdown that you can see how that question was broken down and how little of math that you actually have to use, right? If you know a little bit about percentages. And I see some people do, so I love it. So the correct answer is C. So to all my C's, good job. And so the breakdown, right? You got the first figure is out. You look at it said 54 is out of 600. So 50%. So it is way less than 50%, right? And so E is out. There's no way it's going to be 90%. But I love your two answers because y'all were so close. I love it. So E can be eliminated, right? So then let's think about percentages. When you think about like easy percentages that you can do, like 10% or 25%, you can always start there. And if we look at 10% of 600, that's 60. The number that we were given in the problem was 54. And because 54 is less than 10%, I can go ahead and get rid of D. And so closing out all the rest of those, right? Looking at that, the closest one without going over is going to be C at 9%, right? But like I said, I love your answer choices because you were right there on the mark, either C or D, right? So thank you for your participation. Go to our next strategy. And let's look at strategy 4. And so word problems, I think when I was in school, yes, yes, Mary, exactly that. When I was in school, like word problems, I thought were like my arch nemesis. I was like, this is not it. But I love this strategy, right? Remember the basic approach to word problems. One, you want to know the question. So read the problem all the way through and then underline the question. Simply underline what they're asking you because sometimes there's no math that needs to be done, right? We'll get into it and we're doing math and then we look and we're like, we didn't even answer the question, right? Didn't even have to do math for it. And then let the answer help you. If I read the question or read the problem, underline the question, I immediately look at the type of answers that they're giving me, right? Those options. And so if I can look at those clues, use the POE, process of elimination, and ballparking, then I can go ahead and eliminate some answers before I do any type of math. And then finally, what you have left, if you have some math to do, break that down into bite-sized pieces. Every problem has a tendency to have a lot of information, but if you process it one piece at a time, it's going to help you, right? Because then you can catch that tricky phrasing or that tricky answer that looks like it could have been an answer, but when you look again, you realize that it wasn't. I don't know, I've got a response here. Let me see. Yes, definitely with percentages, right? To make a percentage, also with percentages, to make a percent a decimal, divide that percent by 100. Absolutely. And so remember, even if you didn't know the percentages to the problem we did before, if you go to your calculator and put in that 0.10 times 600, you're going to get you an answer pretty quick, right? So again, using that calculator wisely. All right, and so those are the end of our strategies for math. Before we go into some examples, do you have any questions up until this point?
All right, so maybe it looks like we're ready to go to the examples.
All right, and so let me unshare myself. So Mary, you have the examples, correct?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'm gonna unshare. And if you do have the, if you read your email already, which I hope you did, and you have the packet, it is the second portion of the second part of that packet with that practice test. And so we're going to look at question 16. And so this is some participation, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions. And so you can give me an answer in the chat, or like I said, you can raise your hand or you can answer out loud. So 16 should kind of be hopefully for you on the easier end. I'm guessing at 16, we're not that deep into a lot of difficult questions. But 16 says, what value of X satisfies the equation? And so the equation says -3 in parentheses times 4x minus 5 equals 2 times 1 minus 5x. Take a look at the question. I'm going to give you 1 minute to think about. What I want you to put in the chat, though, is how would you go about solving this question? Like process of elimination, or what would you do first? Put that in the chat for me. I'm going to give you 1 minute. If you come up with an answer, let me know in the chat or out loud. And I've got my timer set at 1 minute.
I would say distribute both sides.
Distribute both sides, okay? Was that Abby?
Yeah.
Okay, distribute both sides. I like it. All right, we've got another answer that says use FOIL or distribute. Yeah, okay, great. Same thing, right? I love it. How much time? Got about 10 seconds left. If anyone has the answer, you're welcome to put that in as well. Awesome. All right, that's time. So I did get one answer in the chat, and oh, I got two. There we go. All right, so I don't know if we can catch them, Mary. A couple of the responses. So distribute, someone else said use PEMDAS. I'm having, that can be very interesting. Yes, it said having 3 learning disorders. This is fun.
We got several Ks for answers.
Ks. I love it. So the answer is K. And I'll do just a quick kind of breakdown of how we answer that, how hopefully, I don't know if that's how you got the answer, but I know what I would have done is looking at it, I would have done what a lot of you said was distributive property first, right? I can distribute the number that is outside the variable, outside of the parentheses. And once you distribute, you end up with negative 12x plus 15 equals 2 minus 10x, right? And then once you get that, you're just combining the terms together. So I'm gonna put my x's on one side, my constants go on another side, and then I can just divide. So by the time I do that, I end up with 13 divided by 2. All right, and then that was an answer. So I knew, I was like, okay, great, 13 divided by 2. And I have to go any further. So great job, y'all. Thank you so much. Mary, can we go to question 34?
Yep, give me a moment to scroll. Any remaining questions on that one we just left now that I left it?
Yes. Any questions at all? All right, so let's look at 34. I like 34 because there's not a lot of math involved in this one. So in the standard XY coordinate plane, a circle with its center at 8, 5 and a radius of 9 coordinate units has which of the following equations? So take a look at it. I want you to take a look at each answer and go ahead and eliminate anything immediately that you know cannot be correct. Now I'm going to give you 1 minute, but hopefully it does not take you 1 minute to answer this question, right? So think about what it is that you need from the question and then what your answer would be. So 1 minute, I'm setting my timer right now. All right. I got some smarties on this webinar. Oh, I already got one answer. Okay. You still have 33 seconds. H, okay. I've got an F, I have an H, I have another F. Now these are a couple of my students that are on here, so I'm feeling like a proud mom right now. So Charles asked, is this the distance formula? That is a really good question. And that is time as well. That is a really good question, Charles. H, really understand it. Great. So I love this. Okay. So one thing that was mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar was about not having a formula sheet. And so the importance of knowing some basic formulas, right, that you have to put to memory. And if you have not dealt with circles yet, you may not be yet familiar with this particular equation, but this is the equation of a circle. And immediately when I read the question, some things that stood out to me was the fact that they told me it was a circle. They gave me a center that had both positive numbers, and there was a radius. I'm going to attempt to put that circle equation into the chat. That little caret, though, y'all, stands for raising it to the power of 2, if you're unfamiliar with that.
You know, I do have a question though.
Yes.
How does 81 play into this? Because I don't see 81 in the equation.
Right. So I'm going to actually put this, let me put this in the chat. I'm going to put the equation in the chat. And like I said, that little caret symbol is like raising it to the power of 2. And so that's where 81 comes in, because the correct answer is F. And the reason is because that formula that I put into the chat deals with H and K, which is our center, the 8 and 5. And then because the radius is a squared number, when I put the 9 or substitute the 9 in for the R, I have to square 9. Does that make sense?
I'm going to jump in just one moment.
Okay.
Miss Tally, on your formula, there needs to be a plus sign. So it's X minus H
It is
squared
plus
Y minus K squared. So that first equal sign should actually be a plus sign. And so reading it out loud for the recording, the circle formula is X minus H. H is that first coordinate. So that H is the 8 in this problem squared plus Y minus K squared. K in this example is 5 equals R squared, and R is the radius. Sorry to jump in. I just wanted to make that quick correction. So
no, thank you. Yes, I forgot to hit my shift key when I put my plus sign in. Thank you. So yeah, so Charles made a great observation earlier. He asked if it was the distance formula. And so the only difference between the distance formula and we're talking about the circle, the equation of a circle, right? Is that distance formula has to do with the distance between 2 points on a coordinate plane. So we're talking about distance formula. Keyword there is that I'm going to have 2 points that have a distance, and I need to find that distance out. Okay. And it is And it's also square rooted, yes. So whether square root comes in, yes, the distance formula has a big square root over top of it, right? And then also understanding the difference between an equation and a formula, right? And so just again, those basic things like the Pythagorean theorem, knowing that theorem, knowing the circle equation, knowing the distance formula, because really 34 again did not require us to do any math, but it did require for us to know an equation for the circle. Any other questions or comments? So, and if I didn't say it out loud, Charles said that he was conflicted between the distance formula and also said that h is the value of x, right? And Mary did respond and said, yes, h is the value of x. And it is alphabetical order.
Yeah, that alphabetical order thing, I want to explain that because that's what saved me going through math is, so in this formula that Ms. Talley shared with you, you have an H and a K, and you have an X and a Y. Well, if you put H and K in alphabetical order and X and Y in alphabetical order, you'll know which ones go with which one. So X comes first and H comes first, those go together. Y comes second, K comes second, those go together. And so you'll know which ones go in which parentheses.
Absolutely.
So that's just what worked for me because I'm a little weird. So, all right.
I definitely.
Any other questions on this one, or have we totally confused you? All right, going on to number 60. Okay, we're going to do one more problem. This will be problem number 60. So on problem 60, it says, if a publisher charges $15 for the first copy of a book that is ordered and $12 for each additional copy, which of the following expressions represents the cost of Y books? And our options are F, 12Y plus 3, G, 12Y plus 15, H, 15Y minus 3, J, 15Y plus 3, or K, 15Y plus 12. So lots of different options in there. They all look like they have elements that are right, some that are wrong. They have numbers that all kind of sort of make sense. So let's kind of work through this and see where we can get. So first thing that I did was like, okay, let's do a couple of examples. So first I tried out, let's pretend like we're going to buy 3 books and see what happens. So based on the instructions in the question, if we buy 3 books, the first book is going to be $15. So that's 15 times 1. That 1 represents the first book. And so that means we have 2 books left over, and that means those last 2 books are going to be $12 each, so that's 12 times the 2 books that are left over. Okay, so there's our expression if we were going to buy 3 books. Well, let's try another one. This time, let's say we're going to buy 7 books. So again, the first book is $15, so 15 times 1 for that first book. And this time, the number of books we have left over is 6. 7 minus 1 is 6. So the 6 books that are left over, it's going to be $12 times those remaining 6 books. So that's kind of a beginning of what our expression is going to look like. So we need to pay attention to what's happening with our numbers here. We have the 15 for our first copy, that's staying consistent. We have the 12 for the remaining copies, but it's what that 12 is being multiplied by that keeps changing. And if you notice, it changes based on the total number of books we're buying. So the first time we were buying 3 books, that 12 is being multiplied by 2, so it went down by 1, so it's a minus 1. Same thing at the second example, we're buying 7 books, it went down by 1. It's being multiplied by 6. So there's a minus 1 in there because that minus 1, that's that first book. That represents that first book, that's the $15. The 12 is only times what's remaining. So let's see if we can take that information and put it into our general expression that would take care of no matter how many books we're buying, whether it's 3 books, 7 books, 400 books, this expression will work every time. So the first thing we know, 15 always is going to be the first number to represent that first copy. Now, we wrote 15 times 1 in each of those examples. We all know 15 times 1 is 15. So you can just write the 15 and just leave it there. You don't need the times 1. So 15. And then we know we're going to add on the 12 times something else. So it's going to be plus 12 times the rest of the books. And so this is going to be a group of the rest of the books. And as we mentioned, the rest of the books minus 1. It's minus 1 because that first book is already accounted for with the 15. So y is the rest of the books minus 1. So y minus 1 is the rest of the books. It's in the parentheses because that's the entire rest of the group. Those parentheses make it a group. It makes it a family. You have to have the parentheses to keep it all together in the group. But that expression is not simplified, plus it's not one of your answer choices. So we can make this even simpler. And now you get to do some of the fun math. I like this kind of math. So you're going to distribute that 12. So distribute the 12, so it's going to be 12 times y and 12 times negative 1. And so that will give you 15 plus 12y minus 12. And now you're going to combine your like terms. You can see you have a 15 and a 12, or minus 12, so those two can be combined. You cannot do anything with the 12y. There's nothing else in there with y, so that one's just going to stay by itself. But the 15 and the minus 12, those can go together. You know 15 minus 12 is 3. So you're going to combine those terms, and your final answer, your most simplified expression, is 12y plus 3. And if you look at your answer choices, 12y plus 3 is answer choice F, and that is the correct answer for number 60.
You see any additional questions?
Yeah, Charles had a question a little earlier about the quadratic formula and kind of getting messed up in that. Charles, do you want to either come off from mute and ask your question or put it in the chat again? And we'll see what we can say about that one for you.
Yeah, so with the quadratic formula, sometimes I kind of get like confused with it because I don't remember like the whole thing. So how can I get better at that, basically?
Gotcha. So the quadratic formula, hold on now. Didn't even think about. I always forget that this Teams doesn't really let you be great about pulling up or putting equations into the chat. But if Mary finds the quadratic formula online, if she'll pull it up for me, we'll take a look at it really quick. But the quadratic formula, right, you got to think about what it's being used for. And when we think about quadratics, we're talking about expressions or equations that are that have the highest power is x to the second power, right? So anything that comes behind that, it could be one or two terms left, because that's the only thing you can have is one single x and a constant, or vice versa. And so if I'm talking about a quadratic formula, I'm talking about expressions or equations that deal with just that x to the second power. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And also, like, how do you use a calculator on the test? Because I don't really find myself using a calculator, and I lose a lot of time doing it.
So so it depends, Charles, right? It depends on what you already know about the content. Because if you're using one of the graphing calculators, you do want to have prior knowledge on how to use the graphing part of the calculator. But if not, if you're just using the calculator for algebra problems and questions, if you know how to put the input in, right? If I know how to put in a square root of a number, like I said, we use these Texas Instruments. We have some beautiful new ones too, but this is a popular one that is still used. And I usually show my students like how to use it, right? If we're just in class and I'm using the calculator, I'm going to show them step by step how to use it and keep telling them the same thing until they remember. But knowing like that I can choose the second button to do the square root, because anything that's highlighted in blue requires for me to hit the second button first. So it's kind of those how-tos on the calculator. And only using it at that time for the ACT for what you know how to use it for. And then I think Mary has a comment.
Yeah, and I'm going to say, and ACT is really clear on this, you don't have to use a calculator at all.
Nope.
It's not required. And as a
Nope.
matter of fact, they say it's not really even needed. And Charles, you said something that I absolutely agree with. Sometimes that calculator slows you down.
Yeah.
And so don't feel obligated to use a calculator. If you think it's going to help you, or if you want to have one there just in case, that's fine. But if you find you're moving through this test and you haven't turned it on, don't panic. That's fine. As you saw in those examples, we didn't use a calculator once, because you could go through and you could logically figure out what the answers were without doing any computation at all. So if you are comfortable with your math skills and you can go through those questions quickly without ever turning it on, do it.
Yes.
That's just fine.
Absolutely. And then Charles, did you still have the, I know you put a question in here, like what question type is this? Were you referring to number 60? And he also said he struggles identifying rules with certain question types. Rules as in like integer rules, like negative and positive numbers. Is that what you're referring to?
No, so it's more so like this is basically the formula to go about the question, or like certain like strategy or like approach you need to have towards it. Because I'll find like a million things until I come upon like the my final answer, and I'll find myself wasting too much time on it.
Right. So this is recorded. This webinar is recorded. So I would go back again and look at those strategies, right? So before you ever do any math, I highly suggest that you read the question and understand what they're asking you, and then look at the answers. Right? So go ahead and read the question, look at the answers before you do any math. Because you may go ahead and be able to eliminate some answers, or you're like, what? No, like what you thought may have been what they were asking was not when you look at the answers. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing, I emailed you that PDF, and it is an actual ACT test. It's a full-length test.
Yes.
Go through right now while you're in a relaxed atmosphere. Look at those questions. Look at how they're asking the questions, how you would go about solving them. Because the more familiar you become with how ACT asks questions,
Yes.
then you'll get to a question when you're actually at the test and go, oh, I remember how they asked this. It might have different numbers, but you remember the style of the question and you remember how you approached it while you were just making yourself familiar with it. Then you'll be much more comfortable with going, okay, I might not remember exactly what I did, but I remember the approach. I remember what I did when I was in this calm environment, and that will get you started in the right direction. And that's kind of the whole point of me sending that to you, because you can see, I'm going to show you, I have this massive book, and you've seen these. There ain't nobody in the world that's going to read 1,000 pages, but that booklet, that one's doable. So use that to make yourself familiar with it.
Absolutely. That is great, Mary. And I was going to highly suggest you doing a practice test, right? Doing the one that is already provided for you in the email. Just going in cold turkey may not give you the end result that you're looking for. But, with anything, when you're practicing it, you become more comfortable, and your anxiety and things, when you get into the testing, kind of, it's eliminated, right? It goes down, it's lessened. Did that kind of clear it up for you, Charles?
Yeah.
Perfect. And then is it Demarius asked, or Demarius asked, are there any formulas I need to remember? Some that we mentioned earlier, particularly because we had a question about the circle equation. That would be one to remember. Also, because there are parts of geometry and triangles, I would know the Pythagorean theorem.
ACT loves the Pythagorean theorem.
They
I can
do.
almost guarantee you will see at least one Pythagorean theorem question on the test.
Yes. I was trying to think of any other ones. He said exactly. Charles said exactly, yes. Just trying to remember other ones. We talked about the distance formula earlier. They may ask those questions, but I would know those. And trig functions, sine, cosine, and tangent.
And some basics. You want, your basic, how to find the area of a square, area of a
Yeah.
circle. Some of those
Yeah.
real basic geometry ones you'll probably need to know. So those.
Definitely.
And again, if you get to one, like if you haven't gotten into some of those trig functions like Charles just mentioned, the never and your bubble of the day can be your friend, and don't leave anything blank.
Yes.
Do not leave a single blank bubble. I'm telling you, don't do
Yes.
it. Okay.
Yes. If anyone missed the beginning of that webinar, that was one of the strategies, is never leaving anything blank and having your bubble of the day, right? If you get to a question and you're like, I can't even eliminate anything, I have no idea what they're talking about, fill in that bubble of the day and move to the next question so that you can accumulate the number of questions correct that you're looking to get the score that you are wanting to get.
Yeah. We have about 10 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
I love the engagement, though. Thank you so much for asking the questions.
Mm-hmm.
That's the point. That's why we're here. We have a Kahoot. It's kind of going to recap the different tips that Ms. Tally shared with you. So I'm going to put it up here on the screen so you guys can start getting signed up for this, so we can kind of do a quick run through of these. But also you can keep posting your questions in the chat too, and we'll keep going through those as people get signed up for the Kahoot, so we can go through this. And then I'm also going to, in a few minutes, put the link to that little evaluation form that I mentioned at the start, so we can get your comments about, what you learned and what you wish you had learned and what you want to see in the future. So great. Thank you. First person signed up. Awesome. Let's get some more. Not Parker. I like that. Rowan is back. Welcome back, Rowan. Awesome. We should have a bunch of players. We got about 30 people in this webinar, so let's see how it's going.
Yeah, stay with us. Finish it out. Definitely, so that you can get the form at the end for the evaluation.
I think my main thing I might be looking at is the word problems, because sometimes they can be confusing.
Absolutely. They like to ask those little tricky, the questioning can be tricky.
Mm-hmm. And really, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. No, go ahead, Mary.
I was going to say, really sitting down and pulling those apart and circling the question. What is it that they're really asking? And what are the pieces of the information they give me that I really have to answer it? That will get you through a bunch, because they'll throw things in there that really don't matter, and it will confuse you. And if you can figure that out and get rid of them, it will help you a lot.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Oh, we got a lot of players.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, here we go. First question. Math test has blank number of problems and lasts blank minutes.
Ooh, them answers came quickly.
Woohoo! Look at that. Yes,
Perfect.
60 problems and 60 minutes. Nice.
Yes.
Way to go, Ron. True or false? Math test gets easier as you go.
Come on, y'all are listening. Come on.
Yep, the math test actually gets harder as you go, gets more difficult.
Yes.
This one's hard. Main areas tested on math:
Ooh.
9 of you rocked it. And I totally understand the 9 of you who marked algebra functions and geometry. Algebra functions and geometry are actually part of the preparing for higher math, so I get it. If I was grading this myself, I actually wouldn't mark that wrong because it's kind of sort of right. But the big topics are the preparing for higher math, integrating essential skills, and modeling.
Absolutely.
And I like whoever answered green in there. Nice.
Right?
In the chat. Yeah, if you want to put your answers in the chat, that's good. About how many questions do you need to get correct to reach the college readiness benchmark of 22?
Yes, great job.
Good. Yeah, you need to get about 33 to 38, just over half of them right to reach the college readiness benchmark. That benchmark just means you have about a 50% or greater chance of passing your first year college class. Higher scores are great, and higher is going to be better, but that 22 just means you're going to have a greater likelihood of passing your first year college class. That's what that means. True or false? You can use the calculator on the ACT. True, good.
Yes,
I figured you'd know that one.
Right?
Now, later, never groups. Which question should you use bubble of the day? The now or the later or the never? You use it on the never. Yep, never, because it's like, I am never getting this. Give me the bubble of the day and move on.
Going. Yeah, definitely true, never, perfect.
Which 2 strategies work together to now narrow down answer choices?
Come on, rock, paper, scissors.
Right. Look at you guys. Process of elimination and ballpark. Yellow. I like that. Yes.
Wonderful.
And last one. All of these are good strategies for word problems except panic and cry is not going to help you a whole lot, but the others will. So
I will.
So we're going to see how we did. Here's our podium. And while this is coming up, this is what I'm putting in the chat is the link to the evaluation form. We would love it if you could take a few minutes to do that. And congratulations to our top 3 and Lawton for coming in number 1 on our Kahoot. Awesome. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming. We hope that you learned some valuable tips and tricks and insights, that the PDF will help you do some practice. And we'll stick around for a few minutes if you have some more questions. Panic and cry is valid. Yes, for one, I have done that myself too, so I'm right there with you. And if you have questions you want to stick around and chat, we will stick around with you for a few minutes. If you have other things you need to go do them. And we hope that we'll see you in some of our future webinars. We have them every Wednesday leading up to the March 1st ACT. Good luck to y'all, and we will see you soon. The recording will be available within a week, and it's on the Metro website, mnps.org/ACT. Have a great day.